Hi, welcome back to the Hornthrowers podcast. We're joined by Ross from Dawn Treader tonight. And so Dawn Treader are a Blackgaze band I understand you identify as.
Yeah, that's kind of the closest term that I've kind of agreed upon.
Yeah, it definitely has that kind of like Alcest vibe, kind of so I think that
but
fits.
without the whole pest noir associations. I couldn't listen to Alcest for a long
Yeah,
time.
Alcest were quite a big influence on me at the start, and then I
Yeah.
did a bit more research. I was like, oh shit.
I kind of in fairness, he has distanced
Yeah.
himself
Well,
from it, and it's kind
Yeah,
of he was a
yeah. I
teenager
mean,
at the time, and
yeah,
yeah.
because we saw
it
them
was a
at
long time ago, but
we saw them at
still.
Damnation 2019, and we were like, these are amazing. And then I saw all that stuff at past one. I was like, oh, didn't wear my Alcest shirt for years.
Yeah.
Um, but it is kind of a thing that people can move past it, and like I know that like Dark Throne now kind of on, for example, like Sketch, but they did have that issue in the early '90s of like having like true Aryan black metal like, printed on the
Yeah, the
vinyls and stuff.
the
Yeah.
the edgiest of edgelords back in the day, but
Yeah,
they seem to have smoothed off a little bit
yeah,
in the last
it's
few
something I
years,
know they
certainly.
regret now. Like they've mentioned in interviews,
Hmm.
like Fenriz specifically has mentioned in interviews that he really regrets that and whatnot. But yeah, we're on to politics already.
Yeah.
Like,
Immediately, yeah.
One thing I wanted to say, you said about the closest thing to identify your music with. Why does Black Gaze get called Void Gaze on Spotify? Would you say it's Void
I
Gaze?
don't know. I don't know. I don't hate void gaze as a term. Like I kind of like it for a kind of vibe that you might get from listening to I guess black gaze or kind of related adjacent stuff. I don't know why they're pushing it so hard though, because it's like they're unaware it already has a name that has kind of been agreed upon
yeah, there's been
generally.
some
But they're very determined, and I have to respect them for that.
like when the Spotify Wrapped came out like a couple of years ago, where they first started using void gaze as a term, there was some like tremendous memes that came out. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw them, like any of them.
I did, yeah, yeah, absolutely, I did. That was when I started kind of first listening to Blackgaze heavily. So that came
Mm.
up a lot in my Spotify Wrapped that year. That was interesting.
I think that
Yeah,
was
didn't really understand it.
possibly the year we saw Alcest and kind of got turned on to that, like because it
Yeah.
was that was like because it was a damnation. It was like Alcest, like kind of you felt like you were like transported to like another planet or something. And then like Opeth came and like closed the night like
Ooh,
immediately afterwards. It was just
Well,
yeah.
Mayhem were on in between, and
Were they?
Mayhem's sound was
amazing.
awful.
Oh yeah, I was so
just to
disappointed.
pass your vibe as well. Like,
Sorry,
It cut out then,
yeah,
sorry.
ooh,
it cut out a little
cut
bit
there
there.
for a
What did you
second.
say?
Sorry, I
Sorry.
don't know how well my internet's handling this. I was making a daft joke. It really didn't matter.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. But so what was your
Um,
first sort of start with music? So what came first, like Viatorum or Dawn Treasure? And it's a bit unusual for a vocalist to go on to another, to have its own solo project, but then not sing on it or do vocals on it. So I just wondered what the background with all that was.
I actually hadn't really thought about it that way specifically, but that's a good point. So vocals are kind of one of the things that I'm newest to. I've only really been a vocalist for maybe 5 or 6 years,
Sorry.
like intentionally in bands, and putting real effort into to honing it and getting sounding the way that I want to. Before that, I was in a couple of hardcore bands, and I was literally just yelling and shredding my throat. So I've always been I actually started off playing drums when I was about 12, and then picked up guitar when I was maybe 14 or 15. So I've mostly been focused on those instruments for the longest time. So I mostly played guitar in lots of bands growing up. So I came up in like the kind of UK hardcore scene in like the kind of late 2000s, early 2010s. So I'm playing mostly like quite thrashy, kind of like heavy hardcore, lots of beat downs, lots of tough guy bullshit,
Mm.
which was fun. Which was fun for a while, but me and my brother used to play in a lot of hardcore bands together, and then as we were getting older, we were kind of like, "Oh, this isn't really doing it for us anymore." And he was getting really into like Deftones and the kind of like '90s grunge kind of vibe as well. At the point, I was starting to get more into black metal, and as we were jamming, we ended up kind of forming this band with another friend of ours called Generations, which was like kind of post metal instrumental stuff. Um, which eventually disbanded because my brother moved away, and then the way that Dawn Treader essentially came about was me taking some guitar parts and discarded riffs and discarded kind of like half songs and bridges and bits and pieces of stuff. And those kind of discarded parts and a couple of new songs essentially became the Dawn Treader first EP, which initially I just released on SoundCloud and just kind of threw it out into the world and kind of forgot about it. I was like, maybe I'll come back to this, maybe I won't. And then, so that would have been around 2018 that I released that, and then Viatorum happened after that. So that's my first gig as a vocalist where everyone's been taking it 110% really seriously, which has been a lot of fun. Obviously, the pandemic hit, which made things a little bit difficult, but we managed to keep that going and play some really sick shows last year. But obviously, at the point when the lockdown started to hit, that working full-time on that band wasn't really an option for any of us, unfortunately. So as I think a lot of musicians did, I was like, oh, hey, I was thinking about maybe kicking the solo project off again. So, but now I'm way more into blast beats than I used to be. So what happens if I take some of those and add it into what I was, and then that essentially became the first, the Burial of the Dead EP, which shout out to Anti-Fascist Black Metal Network for promoting it, because that gave me a huge boost.
Yeah,
right
I think that's where I found it. Because I was trying to think, where did I first hear about it? And I think it was through that. But it's one of those
I was lucky enough to just stumble upon them, I think, from someone else's story on Instagram. I was like, oh, this is perfect. And they were, gracious enough to host it when it came out. So that gave me a really massive boost, and it was way more than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be another kind of, I'm just going to throw it out on SoundCloud or Bandcamp or wherever and kind of forget about it and move on to other things. But the reaction kind of made me think, oh shit, actually maybe there might be something to this. And I really enjoy doing this kind of thing and just kind of having complete creative control and not really caring too much about trying to fit into any particular niche. Just like, these are all the vibes and sounds that I enjoy, so I'm just going to throw them all at the wall and see what sticks. And the point you mentioned about being a vocalist but having an instrumental project, maybe this is something we'll talk about later in terms of like future plans, but the LP, which is the next thing to come out, that is going to have vocals on it. So that will be the first Dawn Treader release with vocals across the whole album, with some guest appearances as well, which I'm psyched to talk about.
Well,
awesome. Yeah, I did have a question. It's hopefully, it isn't the question that I was like going to ask, but it's a kind of might give me a chance to pick up the thread again. But is Dawn Treader a Chronicles of Narnia reference by any chance? The name?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And that was really cynically decided upon because there's a post-rock band who I love called Caspian, and they named themselves after Prince Caspian. And I thought, okay, what else hasn't been taken and isn't a Lord of the Rings reference? Because that's kind of played out in black metal.
Yeah, like Tolkien you might have noticed. Has been death.
little bit kind of played out, yeah. So I thought, okay, what other literary references can I make? And the only other thing I was reading at the time that was non-fiction was A Song of Ice and Fire, and I thought, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So that's too much. So yeah, Dawn Treader it was.
So like obviously you were mentioning that you came from like a hardcore band originally. That's kind of like your intro into playing music and whatnot. It's really interesting because that's kind of echoing what Simon was saying when he was on the podcast. And I'm noticing that a lot of RABM, for those unfamiliar with the term Red Anarchist black metal and the anti-fascist black metal, they come from more of a punk route rather as opposed to like, the traditional kind of like metal route. Do you think that's kind of more of a reason of like adopting kind of more like radical left-wing politics because of that kind of like punk ethos that's influenced it, or do you feel it's unrelated?
I think to an extent, I definitely think there's a connection there between the kind of what, at least nominally in hardcore, a kind of left-wing safe spaces wasn't really my experience in most of the hardcore scene. It was, maybe I was just going to the wrong shows, I don't know, but it seemed to, for the majority of the time, be a bunch of tough guy meatheads with quite regressive politics most of the time. But I was kind of one of those meatheads at the time, so I don't really think I thought about it that much. We just liked the violence and the energy, essentially. So I think we were kind of more into the beatdown, the American like real tough guy shit. So the punk stuff for me came a little bit later, and that was just like, it was stuff that was before my time mostly, but like most of the Bridge 9 early stuff like Champion and Have Heart and Verse and bands like that who are a lot more melodic and a lot more punky and importantly a lot more vocally kind of left wing. So that was quite a big influence on me getting started. It is, like you do say, it is really interesting to see how much crossover there is from the current wave of like RABM bands and how much of that started in hardcore and punk. And my theory is that's why there's so much D-beat kind of energy in RABM, is because it's a bunch of hardcore dudes trying something new, but they can't help the skank beat,
Well, I mean, like I think Darkthrone really opened the door for that, because like if anyone's like embraced that kind of like D beat, it's probably Fenris and Darkthrone.
That's very true. Yeah, you're not wrong.
But yeah, like it was kind of like, I think like what Simon mentioned, his experiences were with, like, I think it might have been different because he said that he was playing like a lot of punk squats in his original band, and obviously the kind of squatting movement is heavily tied to kind of like anarchist movement. Yeah,
exactly. They're if those spaces existed with the bands that I was kind of into and playing with at that kind of time, where I was super into hardcore, we weren't playing those venues, or no one was telling me about them, at least.
Yeah.
Like that's something that kind of became apparent to me a number of years later. I have still never been lucky enough to play at a squat show. No one's invited me, but yeah, maybe sometime.
No, I've never been to one either.
I wouldn't even know where to, because
if anyone knows where they are, tell us and we'll go.
I think you need to be kind of like in that social circle to even find out about them, because they're on a need to know basis.
I think so, yeah. Which quite understandably, they don't want to get shut down or start having people who aren't kind of to some extent coming into these spaces.
Getting raided by the police is like a real danger for that, I would imagine.
I went to uni in Manchester, and there's always loads of like raves and stuff in places like that, and I'd always hear people on my course had been.
But you never heard about them prior. Yeah.
No, yeah. I just never knew where they were.
Always heard about them afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of like sorry if this is a very sort of generic interviewer question, but what have been like specifically on kind of like the black metal end of things, what have been your big influences that have kind of like informed Dawn Treader's sound?
So in terms of like just middle of the road, straight down the way kind of black metal, at the risk of being really revolutionary here, Darkthrone. So Darkthrone and Immortal were like the first two black metal bands that I ever heard, and I heard them basically at the same time. But Darkthrone was the only one that had any legs for me. Immortal was kind of too far down the spikes and silliness and Dungeons and Dragons aspect, which I think is why I got into metal when I was young, but I didn't like the kind of the fantasy elements of it so much. That never really appealed to me. The kind of the Dio-esque, as much as I respect Dio and what he did, that kind of sphere of the metal world, we'll call it, never really had that much interest for me. I wanted people singing about real things and real issues. So again, that's how you end up getting into hardcore. But black metal weirdly. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. There's a bit of a delay, so I'm not like intentionally interrupting you. But there's no shame kind of in this love for like kind of like entry level bands like Darkthrone and stuff like that, because like they evolved and. Sorry, my Dagoos are going nuts in the corner, and ironically, they are actually named Head and Fenris after Darkthrone. So they're like running around on their wheel and going nuts, and Head's rattling the cage right now. But yeah, anyway, like especially I can see why like Darkthrone would have legs for you, because they did evolve with their sound as well. Like they went through like a punk era. They and even now they're doing like kind of like straight up. Yeah, like the last album was like very much prog throne, but prior to that though, I was really into what they were doing with like the last like maybe 4 albums, where it's like blackened like classic heavy metal, where it sounds like new wave, a bit British heavy metal, but with black metal production. Like I've been really into that, like Hodge of the Scots, all that kind of.
Yeah, so like the Dark Thrones and Black Flags album, I think, is my favorite of that kind of like almost like black and roll kind of era of Dark Throne. It's just a lot of fun, that record, and that's something you don't get a lot of in black metal. It's just fun. Yeah, so it's a nice change of pace when it happens.
That whole cross punk era with Circle the Wagons, Black Flags and Dark Thrones, Fuck Off and Die.
Are we allowed to say that on the podcast?
I think so.
Well, it's not on the radio.
Yeah, it's not coming out on the radio, so we can swear to our heart's content, I guess.
We can't play Canadian metal, even though we've tried to. But
so yeah, we had like an entire block of bands accidentally that were from Canada, and I wanted to play Dark Throne's Canadian metal because why not? And there is one F-bomb in it now. It's just
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, this is about Dawn Treader, not Dark Throne.
I mean, I'm happy to be included in the conversation if Dark Throne are involved. I'm
Yeah,
quite okay with that.
So, Barry, back to you. So, what drew you to the Blackgaze sound? Like, what is it about black metal mixed with like the shoegaze sort of, I don't know how to describe it, vibes? So, what is it about that sort of made you want to make it?
So for me,
sorry, I'm gonna just pick him up.
Yeah.
So it's not
as much as I risk being called a fucking poser here, which is standard half of the black metal course. I'm not into shoegaze as a genre particularly.
Yeah.
I think the blackgaze term is just something that kind of has become a kind of recognized kind of micro genre, I guess. So that's kind of where I've sat with that. For me, as much as one of the big influences is black metal, the other one is probably more post rock than anything else. Which you can really, like, if you go back to the first EP, Anthropocene, and compare that to Burial of the Dead, it's, they might as well be two separate artists, because one of them is very much post rock, and then suddenly there's all these blast beats all over the top of all these distorted guitars. So for me, it was discovering, alongside my brother, which is why we started that kind of post metal band in the end. Bands like This Will Destroy You and Caspian and Explosions in the Sky, and the kind of like catharsis that they build on with these very, very long songs that like you say, it's a vibe. It's just a fucking vibe, and like it's kind of, even as a musician, kind of hard to describe any better than that. It's building layers on top of each other. It's peaks and crescendos and valleys that kind of absorb you and kind of suck you in. And for me, black metal's always had an element of that anyway. When you get caught in like an elongated section with blast beats, it's so hypnotic, and it's so kind of, I'm trying to think of another word better than hypnotic, but that's essentially it. Like you get kind of sucked into it and pulled into it. And for me, there's a massive crossover there with post rock.
Hypnotic
is not in terms of like the sonic, the sounds that you're hearing, but in terms of the kind of effect that it has in the long term, or at least the effect that it had on me. So yeah, shoegaze. I can think of maybe one shoegaze band that I like, and it's My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
So, it's not a genre I've really explored that much. For me, it was always post rock and black metal.
Yeah, because I really like stuff like Jesus and Mary Chain. I remember once being in college and I was listening to it. I took my headphones off. I was like, "What the hell's that noise?" And it was like literally the screeching, like the amp sounds coming from the actual like record on my headphones. And I was like, "God, that sounds awful to anyone that's walked past me." So I was in like the library and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, I think hypnotic is like absolutely the word that you should like. Like black metal, especially like the Epic era, Bathory, but also like bands like Agalloch and things like that. It is, you get into that hypnotic state, and like, especially like not Agalloch, Alcest, when we saw them live, like it felt like a few minutes, maybe, like in that like almost an hour long set, because it was just absolutely transportive, and that's definitely something that your music carries with it as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to wrangle the Daegu.
So it's very entertaining to watch. I'm having a great time.
Guest appearance from Ted.
This is Ted. So the blonde one, rather fittingly, the blonde one is Ted. The brunette is Fenris.
Nice. I mean, I think I'm at serious risk of being upstaged here.
I may put him back in the hopes that he'll stop rattling now, but hopefully, he's had his 15 minutes of fame, so it's good.
Yeah, we're going to back to the whole vibe of like sort of post metally Blackgaze stuff. I've been listening to a lot of like Holy Fawn, so much so I used to put it on to go to sleep for 5 months last year.
I just discovered them.
Yeah, I put it on. It was not their new album. I've not even listened to that one yet. It was the one before. I had that on every night to go to sleep for 5 months, so much so that my Spotify Wrapped was all of them, apart from the last one was Nylon Nights by Sonia, number 5. I was like, oh my God. Because I was like, I wonder what it's going to be, because for years it was Chelsea Wolf over and over again. I didn't even think I listened to it that much. But then this year I was like, what? Why is it all Holy Fawn? And I was like, oh, it's because for some reason it gets you like, it's just so relaxing that I was just able to go to sleep to it.
exactly. I think like
Yeah, I'd like Holy Fawn. I absolutely love the new record. That was my entry point for Holy Fawn. I know you said you haven't heard it. I
Yeah.
highly recommend it, especially as a fan. I need to go back and do a bit of dive into their catalog because the way they blend like electronic elements into to what's traditionally a very kind of practical acoustic world, I think is really fascinating and it's beautiful to listen to. I love it.
Yeah. I was first introduced to them by Randy Blythe. I think I saw him. I think he was wearing a Holy Fawn t-shirt. I was like, oh, what are they? And I looked and it was like that. And I was like, oh, that's well surprising.
So
yeah, not a band I'd expect him to be super into. To be honest,
No.
This seems a bit chill.
So this might be like a bit of a stretch, but it kind of like was like talking about what you were saying before about a traditionally like acoustic genre that also like kind of like delves into that hypnotic state. Are you familiar with because it's something I was getting like a lot from your music, especially with like the sound samples used, etc. Are you familiar with Rome at all?
I don't think so. No, it doesn't ring any bells.
Oh, they're like it's like a one-man studio project, but like he tours with the band, and it is it's like traditional sort of like folk music paired with like a lot of like audio samples, sort of things that in the same way that like Dawn Treader does, and like highly recommend it. There's like an amazing album called Flowers from Exile, which is just incredible. But yeah, I mean, clearly I was way off because like I was getting like a lot of those vibes from your music, and yeah.
It wasn't intentional, I can tell you that much, but I'm definitely going to check that out. That sounds pretty sweet. I'm going to want to experience that for myself.
Again, like
I don't think I've listened to them before.
They're really good. Like it's people who typically like both black metal, goth music, ambient stuff tend to be really into neofolk because it kind of has a lot of the same qualities, just more drawing on like folk traditions as opposed to yeah.
I get scared with neofolk though because I know that's got a similar problem to black metal, and I'm like, oh, not another genre to vet each band.
Yeah, like
it's not something I've not got delved into neofolk too much, but it is something I've heard is a kind of bizarrely sketchy scene for such kind of laid back music. There's a lot of
the trouble is it deals like
chuds in there apparently.
Yeah, the lyrical content with Rome specifically is like so heavily usually about like early 20th century history when sort of politically everything was very polarized and stuff like that, so it kind of dealing with those lyrical themes becomes a bit anyway, so yeah.
Yeah,
I'll research them before I listen to them.
I mean, like,
that's what I do all the time.
The only thing that Rome have ever done that has been sketchy is I'm blanking on the guy's name now, but he was an Italian poet who was heavily involved in fascist Italy. They had a quote of his on the back of one of their t-shirts, and it was supposedly meant to be ironic and that there was subtext that everyone else was just too dumb to understand. But that's the only sort of like problematic thing that I know that he's ever done. But yeah, who knows?
Well, that's the thing. After a certain point, you can't really know people's intentions, and you kind of have to decide for yourself what is too much of a red flag and what's going to put you off. There are, I think everyone has to kind of establish those rules for themselves and not try and gatekeep leftist black metal. I think the fact that there is such a healthy scene already, I think is a really good sign. But there needs to be an element of kind of, I'm not going to be ostracized for making my own decisions about who I do and do not listen to. Financially supporting sketchy artists is obviously a completely separate conversation. But in terms of just personal enjoyment, I think if you like Burzum and you are willing to accept all the shitty things that he did, and you still want to listen to it, that's on you. I might have some opinions about that, but that's your own decision. As long as you're comfortable with that, that's
it is. It is a very difficult one when you're talking about the concept of separating art and artist, and it's something I've delved into with Simon as well, because it's like kind of like a very big thing with that, and it's kind of you run into a difficulty of alienating. Oh, in a second, you run into the difficulty of alienating people that might actually be receptive to your message if you're giving them shit for just wearing like a Burzum shirt when maybe they haven't been exposed to these ideas and whatnot. And also, kind of like playing that purity politics. Yeah, it doesn't always work out in our favor. And Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna.
Give him some sunflower seeds.
I did. Oh god, this is such an unprofessional setup. I apologize.
Yeah, because we could do it through community radio, so it's where it's set up. It's only open 9 till 5, Monday to
Yeah.
Friday. So when it gets after that, we're like, we'll set a home setup up. And I'm waiting to move. So when I move, I'm gonna have a dedicated space there.
Sure.
Loose, but I'm just gonna let him roam for
Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah, I've got pads, but they won't be in the same.
I'm honestly surprised my cat hasn't made an appearance yet. I keep
Yeah.
waiting for her to burst through the door to see what I'm doing.
I'm just gonna leave him to roam for the rest of the interview, and then we'll pick
That's
him back up.
okay.
You enjoy yourself. Yep, sorry about that.
It's absolutely all right.
Where were we again? Just- honestly, who knew that Ted would try and upstage the interview so much?
Yeah. He was so well behaved with Tribunal as well.
Yeah, we interviewed Tribunal a few days ago. This is going to come out on Thursday, and then they were very, very well behaved. The Dagoos, so we were like, oh, it'll be fine this time. But then
Acting up, especially for me.
Might actually
Bastard.
put to try and get more eyeballs on the interview. Might put featuring Ted and Fenris.
I mean, if you need to put them in the thumbnail to generate extra clicks, I'm 100% behind that.
Oh yeah, we'll get a
He's
good
like,
photo.
by your foot right now. Yeah, back to actually discussing music though, and not my pets.
One thing I wanted to touch about was because I was obviously during lockdown when it came up, I was interested in the project because it was COVID time. I was just finished uni. I was like, I don't have much money, so I didn't end up buying it, and now I bought it. It's Black Metal Rainbows, like whole collaboration. You know, the it was a mixtape, wasn't it? I know you were on it. And there's the book. I ordered the book today through Blackwell Books because I've been looking for everywhere for it. I went to Waterstones and the guy was like, there's nothing here. And I was like, oh, I need this. So yeah, I just wondered where that came from. What was the thing behind that? And yeah.
I was completely blindsided by that. It was what I later found out was what happened. I was recommended by another one-man act in London called Hapless Wretch, the guy who runs that, Zach, who I did a split EP with towards the beginning of last year. He was approached by Black Metal Rainbows saying, would you like to contribute something to the compilation soundtrack that's going to go alongside the book's release? And do you know anyone else who might be interested in that? And he suggested me. So I'm eternally grateful to him for throwing my name in the ring. It was quite wild. So Black Metal Rainbows I was already aware of when I got this email from the editor, Daniel Lukes. So that was incredibly exciting. It was a book that I've been watching kind of since it was announced, since the initial Kickstarter. I don't think I contributed because I was absolutely dirt poor. So I had a little bit of shame for that. But yeah, exactly. It was pretty rough for everybody. Was counting every penny. But I was really psyched about just the idea that this book was going to become a reality. So then, I guess a year later, to hear directly from them saying, "Do you want to be a part of it?" Even if it's a small. I think I'm track 93 out of 122. I think on the compilation, which
so
is
cool
kind of incredible.
It's so cool that they had that many collaborators though on it. Like,
it kept expanding. So I think initially they announced 75 artists, and then a couple of weeks later it was like 98, and then it just right up until the point it was actually released, they were adding one or two more artists right onto the end. So I think the more traction it got, the more people were expressing an interest. And then now they're doing a release show with Imperial Triumphant headlining in New York, which is wild. It's incredible. I wish I could be there.
Yeah, I know. I knew about the Imperial Triumphant one because I follow someone who's in Couch Slut who is playing it as well. She's like a luthier and she's really cool.
Yeah.
So I follow her Instagram and she's so cool. I'm like, I want to be your friend because she likes all the same things that like me and my partner like, and we're like, oh my god.
Sorry, the name made me corpse.
Oh yeah, that's the band's name's Couch Slut. Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure to have been involved in that. So I think I've gone through this on kind of the various social media blurbs. Initially, I was going to really reach back into my roots and do the "This Will Destroy You" cover song for the compilation because I had nothing else that I was working on at the time. And I quite like the idea of being very literal about the whole post rock with blast beats kind of concept. So literally just taking quite an iconic kind of post rock song and just sticking some blast beats over the top of it, which is essentially what I ended up doing for the B side of the last single. Which is the one that you guys so graciously played on your show, which took me by surprise as well. I was completely blindsided by that. The first I heard about it was when you tagged me on the post on Instagram, and I was immediately very excited.
Cool.
We always get worried.
Quite a few times,
yeah, we get worried when we tag bands. We're like, right, we don't want to annoy anyone now. We're tagging people we're playing so that they'll see it and we can get one of the podcasts. And we're like, how many times is too many times? But yeah, because we.
Well, I mean, you had me at the first one. I was psyched immediately. That was my first radio play that I've ever had for any project, so I was extremely happy about that.
Oh, awesome! We've played you quite a few times actually. I just don't think we've tagged you every time.
No, because we sort of it's gone out the window a bit recently, but we like to play like trad in the first hour because I went through a whole thing last year being dead into like the new like wave of trad metal, and then we'd go like the second hour. Some weeks it'd be all death metal or all crossover and all. Black metal, or then the third hour would be like longer stuff that we maybe wouldn't get played in the radio, like Opeth songs are like 13 minutes, and we're like, we'll put these things at the end, so when people have got through that, they can have something nicer, because it's like by that point 1 a.m. and we're like,
it's the aftercare.
Yeah.
Sure. There's definitely so I went back and listened to the show that was the one that I was aware that you were playing me on, at least. And it was as well as being quite trippy, just seeing my name sandwiched in between much bigger artists than me. There was a really good kind of ebb and flow to the show that I really enjoyed. It seems like you guys do a lot of work crafting what it is you're going to play and how they flow into each other.
Yeah, we was very impressed. Thank you very much. We have like a lot of debate on the actual kind of like structure of the show, so it's kind of like we're trying to be a little bit more like freer with it now, whereas before it was very much rigidly like thrash and trad and classic metal first hour, extreme metal second, and then proggy stuff in the last. But somebody who contributes to the show as well, like kind of pointed out, and he maybe had a point that if you tune in for 1 hour and then you're not hearing the genre you like, you might not retain it. But we do like kind of like setting a atmosphere and kind of going on a bit of a journey with it at the same time.
I think as well, when we craft it, the playlists, usually we'll listen to something and a few things will come up and we'll go, oh, we'll put these in here. So it sort of flows that way. And then we spend about 3 hours programming it, because we don't do it live. We program it before, so we can just sort of listen to stuff as we're putting it in. So it's, yeah.
Ted was just trying to climb one of my shields.
Oh.
Sorry, one of your shields?
How
many shields does a man need?
I have about 5.
Oh, sick. Oh, amazing.
So I got a lot of my stuff is being stored elsewhere, but I currently have a sword, a glaive, a spear, a shield, and a bunch of knives and axes currently here.
As every man should have in his house. I did like 2 years of HEMA when I was like 21, 22.
Awesome.
So I was learning how to use a longsword for a little while there, which in hindsight is very black metal. I should have had some photos taken in Corpse.
I think so. If you are ever sort of around the same area as us, we're more than happy to lend out a few swords and do a little photo shoot for you.
I don't get involved with this.
So you're quite a good photographer, though. So
yeah, I do photography. So I photographed you up a mountain wearing all your stuff.
I'll get.
Oh, nice.
He's gonna go get some props now. Yeah, so I just do all that background stuff.
Oh, it's next to you.
Oh, he's got the sword ready already.
I mean, that makes 2 of us, to be fair.
Oh, sweet.
There we go.
Let's compare blades. Nice. Mine's just like a 12th century arming sword, so it's like one-handed, but yeah.
So this is, I think, a German, like hand and a half bastard, whatever you want to call it. It was about 150 pounds about 12 years ago, and it's quite rusty now. I'm looking at it. I need to give that some TLC, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I could recommend like for just WD-40 or 3-in-1 oil for like the actual like degriming, and then the Hamway sword oil is really good for sort of like aftercare and stuff. But
nice. I'll keep that in mind. It's definitely I would have liked to continue doing HEMA, but it became prohibitively expensive, as I'm sure you know. Buying your equipment and stuff becomes very pricey very quickly.
Yeah, I've been looking at getting like the synthetic training long swords, like 2 of them, just so that me and a friend who do reenactment can try out some like HEMA moves. And
sure.
I'd love to do sort of like later period stuff, but as plate gets introduced, it gets far more expensive, as you said, prohibitively so.
Yeah, absolutely. That's about the point I had to. It was when we had to buy our own sparring uniforms. I was like, this. I don't have $1,000 going spare. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, like I just on one male Hawberk spent like 300 quid for a second-hand male Hawberk. Probably the most expensive bit of kit that I bought. But like
I spent £380 on a lens for my sister's wedding when I photographed it, and I've still not financially recovered. So, so anyway, back round.
Sorry, yeah,
has gone into sword territory.
This is an incredibly chaotic podcast.
As soon as you mention weaponry, he's like goes off on one.
I mean, at least it's a kind of still a black metal adjacent conversation.
Oh,
least,
definitely.
I think. How many swords do you have in your house? I feel like it's a pretty common question in the black metal scene.
Absolutely.
So.
I recently threw God knows how many swords into a skip recently because and you got really annoyed with me.
Oh yeah, I did, yeah.
Because you wanted them, but I didn't know. But like, yeah, they were all like just like rubbish wall hangers, whereas this is like fully tanged and can actually take a beating, and you know, I actually have a practical use for it, as opposed to just like rattly little wall hangers that
Okay, so usually with guests, we ask them to pick like 5 songs that are not explicit that we can play on the radio that sort of like sum up and describe your song, your style, or just things that have influenced you in general. We have to say not explicit because we interviewed Hellripper. He picked 666. I went, oh, that's got a load of F-bombs in it. We can't play that. Quick, go to Spotify, quickly find a song that isn't labeled explicit. It was War is Hell. It has like 5 F-bombs in the chorus, and it went out live.
Multiple choruses,
and we were like, hopefully the radio show doesn't lose radio stations didn't lose a license, but they were like, it's okay, it was a mistake.
They found it funny, actually.
Yeah, so we're like, we've got to be very serious. We can't play swearing anymore.
So, well, you guys did mention to you were after 5 songs. I did my research and made sure they didn't have any swearing in them. So
Thank you.
Hopefully I'm not going to cause any issues for
Thank you very much.
Let me just grab them off my phone. So these are probably going to be quite unsurprising, I think, for a lot of people. So the first one I'm going to pick, which was probably discovered around the same time I was finding out bands like Alcest and Astronoid, who kind of, again, were one of those bands who kind of put me onto what I do now, essentially. And that's Death Heaven, who are obviously, you know, king of the black metal hipsters. Not as much as I think that kind of elitism is really old-fashioned and just boring, honestly. Like, let people like what they like, you know? So it would be Dreamhouse by Death Heaven, which is the first track on Sunbather, which is obviously their like big breakout album. And I think it holds up remarkably well, as much as they don't seem maybe like the nicest dudes. There's definitely
I've heard that
huge egos in that band. I think what they did to kind of push a more kind of post rock blackgazy kind of sound into black metal, I think, and to an extent mainstream it, which I know is why a lot of people don't like them. I think I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now without Sunbather as a record, regardless of how well it's aged. Yeah, I think so. I think it was the right record for the time that it came out. As much as it did upset quite a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I really liked their last record as well. Still, I thought it was, even though it was a bit different, there was less harsh vocals on it, but I'm not bothered by that. It's good. It's good.
I mean, like, there's like bands like Ulva that have like black metal albums with only clean vocals.
Yeah.
You know, and like they are some of the best black and most formative black metal albums ever. Like the first Ulva album.
Well, I think, like, just to get off from the 5 songs topic a little bit, like, one of the things that I enjoy so much about black metal as like an umbrella term is just like the creativity and the freedom and like the diversity of the scenes, the scene/scenes. You can get away with almost anything, it seems like, and still kind of refer to yourself as black metal, or still have people refer to you as black metal. I think so long as you're experimental and kind of focused on what your vision is and how you're going to achieve it, you'll always find an audience for it.
I think it's very much.
I absolutely love it.
I think it's like, you know, more like how punk is an ethos, and arguably you can describe cinema, you know, a piece of cinema as being very punk. I think it's the same thing with black metal, that kind of a lo-fi, kind of like, it's very much DIY, and I think it's a thing where it's as much an aesthetic and a philosophy as much as it is like an actual
I think
musical
with
genre.
punk, it was that anyone can play it. It's the same thing with black metal, where because it was so lo-fi, and a
Yeah.
lot of these bands that started, they weren't very good. That it is sort of just like, well, anyone can play black metal if they really want to, and it's the wanting to do it that, like, so I think that's why Red Anarchist black metal works so much with like the punk ethos and the black metal ethos, because they are very similar.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree with that. So sorry to derail the conversation ever so slightly.
No,
Okay.
So the next one is probably I guess we're kind of contemporaries, although he's a lot more famous than I am. Would be Unrequited, and I think his first album, the track "The Autumn Fire," which was again, I think at the time the most melodic black metal I'd ever heard in my life. I didn't really think you could do that and still be considered black metal. I think the vocals were particularly kind of inspiring because it doesn't even sound like he's emphasizing any words at all. It just sounds like shrieks and wails of like genuine despair and pain, but with this kind of very uplifting quality to it, which is I guess difficult to quantify, but it was a big influence on me when I first discovered that record, and I think you can probably hear that if you listen to his early material and then my stuff. You can hear me ripping him off essentially.
That's kind of
a
a
lot of
thing
time.
as well. Like I think like the level of emotional sincerity and kind of it's I'd hesitate maybe to say unique to black metal, but it's definitely something that I've not found something that hits me in that same way as like black metal, and it's not, like I think like it's not a commercially viable, like genre of music to play, and you have to kind of like play it because you love it, but it is absolutely very much just something like there's this earnestness to it that I don't feel exists in other genres of metal that I've kind of been exposed to be honest.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I think there's like you say, a sincerity to it, and whether or not that kind of like harks all the way back to a bunch of nerdy Norwegian dudes running around the forest with swords, wearing corpse paint and like cloaks and stuff, and just not giving a shit and just being like, no, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to do it, and we don't really care how we're seen because we're creating our own thing. Whether or not that element has kind of run all the way through or not, I don't know, but it seems to be the case that so long as you're sincere, as you say, it's a great word for it, about what you do, again, you'll kind of develop an audience for it, and you'll find people who are receptive to what you're putting out. Whether that's 10 people or 10,000, it doesn't matter. You'll find somebody who's into it. Right, next on the list we have Cult of Luna with Leave Me Here,
nice.
which I think I remember hearing originally on like a Kerrang sampler CD years and years ago when that was still a thing that's how you discovered your new music, was sample CDs that came with Kerrang or Rock Sound or Metal Hammer or whatever. And I think still to this day it's one of the most like emotionally heavy songs I think I've ever heard. I think the delivery of the vocals in particular is so passionate and so like barely restrained. But again, it has these really beautiful kind of uplifting qualities to it as well, and it's that kind of like disconnect between being like crushingly heavy but also very, very beautiful. Is again something I've tried to emulate quite a lot in my career. I'm nowhere near as heavy as Cult of Luna, even if I tried.
But I mean, I don't
think I could get that heavy, but
I think that description, like if you would just take that out of context, not speaking about a specific band, that sums up a lot of ambient black metal and Blackgaze. The kind of like riding the line between some of the heaviest, sort of like passages in music that you can imagine, like sandwiched between some of the most ambient and beautiful and relaxing things. And it's
absolutely.
It somehow makes blast beats like
hypnotic.
Yeah. It's like I can sleep to blast beats. So my partner's like, "How can you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just can."
You get lost in it so quickly.
Yeah.
And like I think you were saying before, it's only going to appeal to quite a small select group of people, but when you're in that select group of people, it feels very, very special.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As much as other people might laugh at you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like it is an absolutely silly and ridiculous sort of like genre, but yeah, it's from my point of view, like I've never been hit emotionally as hard as I have by like really, really good black metal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Same. So the next two songs are not black metal. at all. now that we've had that conversation. So the next one is Like It's Your Last by a UK post-metal band called Devil Sold His Soul, who I think have never gotten the attention or credit that they deserve. They've
I've
been
never
around for a
heard
really
of them,
long time.
Me neither, but
they've changed a lot over the course of their career. So this song is from their first EP, which came out in 2005, 2006, I want to say. They're still around now. Their vocalist quit. They got another vocalist. Then the original vocalist came back. So now they have two. There was drama. There was all kinds of stuff going on with them. But they've been consistently like releasing really, again, like sonically heavy, but very cathartic kind of post-metal with big, epic, soaring, beautiful vocals. And yeah, there's a real kind of catharsis to be had from this band. And I think this is them at their probably angriest on their first EP. And there's again, coming back to what we're talking about with blast beats being kind of hypnotic. There aren't any blast beats on this song, but the last 4 or so minutes is very repetitive and very droning, and you get sucked into this incredible atmosphere that just leaves you, and it's astonishing. Honestly, I've never heard anything quite like it to this day. So highly recommend it. If you don't know Devil Sold a Soul, go and check them out. Hopefully,
we will check them out.
We definitely will be, and we will be playing them on the radio. Yeah,
amazing.
Awesome.
Hopefully you guys find a band that you enjoy. And then so the last one is my favorite band of all time, which is not even black metal adjacent, which is Misery Signals, and one of their songs called The Failsafe off the album Controller, which is, I mean, this came out in maybe 2008, but they've got that very kind of skronky early metalcore energy and kind of aesthetic vibe to it, where there's a lot of weird time signature changes and there's some really heavy breakdowns. There's no clean vocals. It's all very, very heavy and shouty, but there's a real sense of melody. The technicality of what they're doing is incredible. And as much as I am, I guess, a black metal artist, I mostly listen to bands like Misery Signals. If I'm being honest, they kind of, no one's ever done it quite like them. And again, I don't think they've ever really gotten the credit that they deserve for being as influential as they are. There's so many bands like these days, like Polar and Counterparts, kind of in the metalcore sphere, who just sound like a new version of Misery Signals, and they're never really given the credit they deserve for being the innovators that they were. So that was a huge influence on me growing up, for sure.
Excellent. No, like I kind of, when we ask artists to do this, like it's nice to kind of get like a spectrum of like what's formed that sound, even if it isn't, necessarily metal and stuff like that. We'd love to give it a play and kind of like flesh out people's understanding of that band.
I think there's a lot to be discovered. I think, as much as we're in a scene where core is kind of a bit of a dirty word, I do think that there's something in there for everybody. You just have to open yourself up to it and be a little more adventurous, maybe.
Yeah, well, I was always into that stuff as a teenager. That's how I got into stuff. Like I got into Metallica and Slayer and all that, and then everyone I was friends with was into stuff like the Kerrang, more corey bands at the time. I was like, oh, listen to this now. And I still think Parkway Drive, their riffs are like death metal riffs, and if people can say they're not, I think they're lying. I think it's just because they had short hair and they look like surfers that people were like, it doesn't fit my image. Yeah. So I really like Deftones still. They're like one of my favorite bands, and White Pony is like, if I had a Desert Island Discs, White Pony is on that.
I mean, like those horrible metal elitists bully you.
Well, he kicked me out of a tree because he's a few years older than me, and when I first met him, he kicked me out of a tree. Yeah. So I had the whole scene hair and everything, and
oh yeah, when I was growing up, I was also the one getting kicked out of trees for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely like quite ashamedly now, like looking back, but I 100% was a metal elitist, and
I think everybody is to an extent when you're into it, and it's either a phase that you get over quite quickly, or you turn into one of those really angry 40-year-old dudes just yelling at teenagers for not liking the right kind of metal.
Bet you can't even name 3 songs off
the name 3 songs, guys. Yeah,
I
exactly.
couldn't name 3 songs because I listen to an album, and then afterwards someone's like, "What were those songs?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just listened to the album."
Yeah, to be fair, if someone tried to catch me out with that, they almost certainly would. There's very few bands who I can name off the top of my head 3 songs because I just listen to albums, like you say. So you kind of let it just wash over you. You don't really pay that much attention to
absolutely
maybe the track list.
Maybe the bands that I was like into when I was very young, that where it became like your religion, and you'd listen to like cycle through those like Metallica Iron Maiden albums and you know every track, every lyric, etc. But yeah, now especially like ambient stuff where you just sort of like
So I could
get
tell you what the
hypnotized.
melody is like on 3 songs. I couldn't name them to
Yeah.
you.
Honestly, like I have to like immediately catch myself when I'm listening to something I'm really enjoying something to like click like on that song or add it to the playlist because I'm like, no, that needs to be, that's what I want to play on the radio because I can't play the entire album. But
as much as you might want to.
yeah,
We're not
100%.
allowed to play. We're not allowed to play 2 artists back to back, are we?
No, I think in an hour you're allowed to play an artist twice. I think,
But we
like,
get
that's the
around
cutoff.
that. Like we played,
Merciful Fate, then King
and we
Diamond.
played Trivium, and then his side project,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
then we played Ishan because Ishan played on that. So that
It adds
with
like
Gerard
a
Way.
theme and like something to talk about in between
Yeah.
songs. But like Matt Heafy's black metal side project is talking about like experimental stuff. It almost has like weird like cabaret music hall-y sounding weird bits in it, and it's really Ikarabi, is it?
Ibaraki.
Ibaraki. It's
Yeah.
so good. Like who would have thought that Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance could do absolutely great black metal vocals?
I know, I didn't think that either. And I'm a massive
That
My
was
Chemical Romance
definitely-
fan.
That was definitely a plot twist I don't think any of us were expecting. I wasn't the biggest fan of what was actually ended up on that record, but I respected the hell out of Matt Heafy for doing it and just kind of again crafting his own thing and being like, yeah, no, fuck it, I'm gonna try black metal and see how that works out for me. And people enjoyed it. Great, good for them.
Yeah, no, like I got a lot out of that album, and I've even noticed like kind of some newer tracks since he collaborated with Shannon Silence and the Snow. I want to say that like you've definitely been hearing like a lot more like trem-picked guitars and things like that in it, and it's cool seeing like those because I think metalheads get too stuck in that kind of what genre is it? Let's invent a weirdly nuanced title.
Definitely.
Rather
Yeah,
than
we're all guilty of that for sure.
Yeah, like, I think it could it being more of a kind of nebulous concept where genres bleed into each other is kind of like a better approach, but it's equally fun and nerdy to hyperfixate though.
This is true. What would we talk about for hours at a time if we weren't inventing microgenres, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, so we'll round it up now because I think we've been going on for about 45 minutes is usually the time we like to go. So is there anything you want to plug? Anything you are excited about with either band or either project?
I guess so. I'll just as much as I didn't come here to talk about my other band, I will while I'm here. I might as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are my other band, my main band, I should say, because it's the only one that's an actual band as opposed to just me in my front room. Viatorum, we have just finished recording our new EP, which is 4 tracks, and hopefully we're going to have that out in the next couple of months. It is anti-fascist, anti-capitalist, genty, proggy, metal, corey stuff. I don't really know. There's a lot going on. I just shout over the top of it. So hopefully that's something that people might get stoked for. Feel free to go and check out our socials and that. Now to plug the actual reason I'm here. So Dawn Trader this year. The only thing I've got concrete planned is definitely coming out this year will be the LP, which is going to be 8 or 9 tracks, probably around an hour. It's going to have a couple of special guests who I'm not announcing yet, but I'm quite psyched to talk about. And it'll have vocals all over the entire record for the first time. So I'm really excited to see how that's all going to pan out.
Awesome.
And just a couple of shout outs would be off the top of my head, Scourge 666, Hapless Wretch, Tumultuous Ruin.
Tumultuous Ruin.
You guys know who you are. My buddies in the ROBM scene, the ones who have been like supporting me since the beginning and kind of helping me find my feet in this scene. Mwah, big love. And to you guys as well. Thank you for playing my music and help having me on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
No, likewise. Yeah. No, thank you for coming on, and it was as you said, an absolute pleasure.
Good, glad to hear it. Thank you very much.
We'll stop recording now.